Welcome USA Today Bestselling Author C.A. Szarek. Yay!
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about this.
Well, I'm excited to have you back again. You've released a whole nother book since we've talked. So in case listeners don't know, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your writing?
Sure. So I write different genres. So I have different groups of readers usually. Sometimes they don't cross over. But what I have going right now is I currently have 4 or 5 different series in different genres. So I have 2 romantic suspense series, 1 high fantasy, like Good Against Evil, Let's Save the World and Fall in Love, high fantasy series with magic and stuff. And then I have a Scottish Highlander time-travel series, but it also has some historical fantasy in it as well. There's some books that don't have any time travel. All of them are related to each other. I just can't seem to pick a lane. I just write whatever I feel and go about my business.
Right. And your latest book, The Highland Essence, falls into the genre of that Highlander time travel romance.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. And I actually have it right here.
Ooh, look, if you have the video, then you will see the pretty cover, the gorgeous cover. Yeah. It's about a woman named Lexi, right, who escapes her family only to time travel to the future Highlands. Mm-hmm. This differs from your other Highland time travel novels, and that typically has the future heroine traveling to the past. What different challenges did you face writing this book in particular?
Stuff I didn't see coming, like you don't think about it every single day. Like as a person who is modern days, grew up in the, born and grown up in the 20th and 21st centuries, you just know stuff. Like, maybe you're familiar with history, but you didn't live it, of course, but you're familiar with it. So I didn't see it coming really. It was really hard to bring somebody from 1694 to 2022 because I had to describe everything. Like, for instance, one that comes to mind is when she went into his kitchen, I had to describe a refrigerator, a microwave, a stove, like things like that. Because, in her time, they're cooking on a hearth. It was really hard. I didn't see that coming when I sat down to write the book. And I honestly don't think if I'll ever do a coming forward in time book again, because it was much more challenging than anticipated. If you think about it every day in your life, when you go about your business, you know what everything is, what a key is, what a shelf is, what a book is. She might know what those things are, but she, walking in someone's house and turning a light switch on, she has no idea what that is. It was very challenging in a way that I didn't see coming. When you send somebody back in time, they're much more easy to assimilate because they know what a lantern is. Things that are a little bit, we just know what that is. Even if an armoire, a standing closet, you know what it is, even if you don't have one in your house now. You know what a fireplace is, even if you don't have one in the house. It was, I didn't see it coming. I didn't expect that challenge when I sat down to write the book, because you have to describe things in terms that someone from 1694 knows. She doesn't know what a cell phone is, although that was fun. To describe a cell phone was fun.
What did you use to describe a cell phone?
Well, the first time she saw it, I just said a black rectangle. She didn't know it had a hard surface. But then after she's with us for a while in 2022, she calls it magic, because it's every answer that you could possibly have. Like, she learns what the internet is, and she's like, oh, magic. Like she learns that all the answers are in this little black box. And the first time that the hero has a call on speakerphone, she doesn't understand that the person is not inside the little box. So it is fun. That part was fun. I do have another book in the series where he comes back and forth in time, but he understands a little bit because he time travels more often. He has a little bit more of an understanding. He knows what a car is. He knows what things are that she didn't necessarily know, being the first time. So it was interesting, to say in the least. It was hard, much harder than anticipated than you think.
Yeah, I remember we were kind of on retreats together, and you were asking us, what would you call like a microwave?
Yeah. How are you going to, if you've never seen a microwave before and you don't know what it does, what do you call it? Because remember, she's from 1694. So they may have books and tablets and stuff, but the numbers on the microwave, she's never seen anything like that.
Like, that is such a great point, because I would have never thought of that until you kind of talked about it. You were telling us about it, that, oh my gosh, it's so much harder bringing someone from the past into the future as opposed to sending them back. Because there is, we do kind of already know what lanterns are. We already know and sometimes they even know a little bit of what the future holds. So why did you approach a story in the reverse, going from the past to the future?
I don't know that I have a definitive answer. One thing I can tell you is that in the book that I just talked about a couple of minutes ago, it takes place, it's Highlander's Portrait. It takes place in 85 years from my original series. And in that series, there's a character named Angus, and he's actually Lexi's big brother. And in that series, even though it was in the future, I just had this sense, this was really before I knew who Lexi was, but I really didn't meet her. I just had this sense that she wasn't there. Angus is a grandfather in that character. He's elderly. And the hero of that book is his grandson. And I just knew that Lexi was a part of the family, but she wasn't there. And I knew she hadn't necessarily died yet. But maybe she had, who knows, because Angus was 92 years old in the book. Lexi's 10 years younger than her brother. And I think that book was the one that first gave me a clue that I was going to have people in my family members, my family that weren't necessarily in the past anymore. And there was a reason for it. So, because I just had that sense, even though I really didn't at that moment in time, I knew of Lexi, but I really didn't know her at that point in time, because basically the whole series is family. So I wrote an original trilogy about 3 couples, and now I'm writing about their kids, basically. That Lexi is the second child of the first couple. So it's just, they all know each other, and I don't know that it was a conscious thing. I just knew she wasn't there. And I was, at the time, so it made sense that she came forward in time, and that she decided to stay.
Sometimes it's the characters, right? They tell us where they want to be.
All of my characters tell me. And sometimes I'll be like, I don't understand why you're there. And the character will be like, go with it. And usually they're right. So I'm just a navigator.
Yeah, you're just like telling their stories, right?
Right. Yeah, they let me know. Usually my characters don't. I always see people on Facebook trying to look for a character's name or give me a guy's name or whatever. It doesn't work like that for me. My characters usually introduce themselves to me. I can't imagine changing their name, because when they are there and when I meet them, that's their name. They say, hey, I'm Lexi. And then I go, oh, okay, cool. Tell me about yourself. Basically is how that goes. I just don't, for me, it's much more, I guess I like when they form organically, but I can't imagine changing a character's name because they introduce themselves to me. They really do. I've never really had a character that I didn't really know their name. Or once I start thinking about them and they start forming in my brain, their name is part of the things that form.
I totally get that. There's been some instances where like I randomly, for some reason, a name came up in my head about a character and I'm just like, is that right? And I'm just like, yeah, that's right. That's completely what their name is for some reason or another.
It's funny all in those little details about them too. Like for instance, in the very first book that I wrote for the series, the Tartan MP3 player, the character's name is Claire. And the opening, she's running on the beach. Well, in my head, I thought she was a redhead and I typed it and she's like, no, I don't have red hair. So it was one of those things that when I typed it, it was wrong. And I didn't know it until I typed it. And she's actually a blonde, which is weird because I'm not really drawn to blondes at all. I like redheads. I like dark hair. I do have occasional blondes. They just are thrown in there, but it's weird when it happens like that because it's not something I picked. She told me that was not her hair was not red. So it was amazing. That's just stuff like that happens to me all the time.
I think that's really cool though. And that's such a great, because you've been writing for a long time. So, and I think as a writer, I think you become comfortable like that. Cause I really do think as we grow in confidence in our writing, as we're writers, there's a point where we can just write and the story just goes. It just takes a life of its own. It runs.
And a lot of times, see, I'm a complete 100% pantser. I don't plan anything. Sometimes going into a scene, I know something needs to happen. Like if I know there has to be some murder, death, kill, or I know there has to be a kiss or whatever has to come at that point in the story, but I don't usually know. So when I sit down to write a book, I know a couple things. I know the names of the characters generally, and I know their jobs. That's, and I know they're going to end up together. That pretty much is how it goes. My favorite part is the chase. So I like that interaction. I love writing banter and I love writing the naughty bits. That's my favorite thing. For me, that all has to come organically. If I plot a book, I don't want to write it. I'm done now. I know too much. See you later. It's not. Mm-mm.
Yeah. And I know that plotting does work for a lot of people. I'm with you. I'm a little bit of a plantser. Like I like a little bit of plotting, but there is a psychology behind that. I have heard that if you actually tell people too much about a book or you write, like you plot it out too much especially for certain people, not everybody, but it almost feels like you've wrote the book already. And so
And
you
I
don't
have
have to do it.
friends who are great plotters and they do the storyboard thing and they do the post-it notes and all that jazz. It just doesn't work for me. Now, does that get me in trouble in the writing process? Probably, because I do get stuck. And it happens. And then I'm like, oh my God, what happens next? I don't know what happens next, please. I don't know. It just, for me, it always ends up working out. So no matter how much I struggle, I've done it 18 times now and a couple short stories to boot. So I think I've set a track record of no matter how I struggle, it's freaking out as a part of my process and it will work out. It'll be fine. It might not feel like that at that moment in time, but it'll be fine.
We're writing friends. Obviously, I mentioned the writing retreat, and then we have our collective girlfriends, our writing girlfriends. So I know you always reach out to us when you're just like, okay, guys, I'm stuck. I'm stuck on this one piece. Is that something that you always utilize if you're stuck? Is like, you're always just like, somebody help me.
Sure. Yeah, I have a couple things that I'll do. I'll read what I wrote last or what happened last. Sometimes while I'm reading, another scene will pop up. That's another thing. I'm a super weird. I don't write linearly. I just, whatever scene pops into my brain, I write it down. So a lot of times if I'm struggling, my brain will move on to the next thing and I'll start the next scene or that whatever needs to, something that I know needs to happen. And there's going to be crap between it. Now, again, that gets me in trouble sometimes because lacing that stuff together is hard. And sometimes stuff doesn't make the cut and I hate losing words. It gives me hives. So it's like wasted work. I don't know. It's like, where can this fit in? Why can I not have this here? But like I said, usually it ends up working itself out. And usually if I have to lose words, it's the right call as much as that hurts my feelings. So, it is what it is, but yeah, so that's what I'll do is first I read what I wrote to try to move forward. And then I usually will send a scene to you guys. I'll email you guys and I'll be like, hey guys, read this. What happens next? Or if you go to a friend that is particularly good at something, our mutual friend, Susie, is awesome at the external conflict stuff. So if I need to blow stuff up, I'll just go say, hey, Susie, something needs to happen here. I have I'm very, very good at emotion and internal conflict. Sometimes I need that helping hand to add some external conflict or overall plot arc. Sometimes I'm not awesome at that. So, you learn, like you said, once you write, you learn stuff, a lot of stuff you learn subconsciously and you just get better at it. But some stuff, if you need help with, just ask somebody who's good at it. We all have those resources and that's the greatest thing about writers. I don't view fellow romance writers as competition. I view them as coworkers, I guess, for lack of, we're all at this together and nobody understands you like another romance writer. I mean, honestly,
yeah,
you're all at that. And so that's the one thing about the romance community is we're not haters that are like, get away from me. I don't want your readers to read my books. We're always there to help somebody and people helped me when I started out. So I try to pay it forward and help people too. It is what it is.
Oh yeah. That's like the one thing I do adore the romance community a lot for that. I've been embraced very much by the romance community, romance writers. And every time I ask somebody for like, hey, do you want to be on my podcast or do you want to do this or do you want to like collaborate together? I have never had anyone tell me, no, I don't want to do that. That's crazy or anything like that. Everyone's been so welcoming and like very, like you said, open with like helping each other. So is that how you kind of did some of your research, is maybe tapping some of those other resources and Googly machine?
Oh, for sure. And I've always been a really, two things. I've always been a history buff and a Scotland buff. So I know a lot about now my novels are not history lessons by any means, but I do try to be pretty accurate. So yeah, if I'm not sure about something, I just either ask somebody who knows more than me or just go to Google. But you do have to be careful because you will get caught down a research rabbit hole if you want to answer one question and then 2 hours later you just could have been writing chapter 5 and 6 and you're instead you're on the Google. You got lost. You're in the corner. They say write what you know. So yeah, that's a certain thing. I mean, I do that. I'm not the end all be all about history, but I do know a lot about Scottish history. And the reason I write about the MacLeods and the MacDonalds is because of their history is fascinating to me. Not to get off on a tangent, but the Clan MacLeod, which were in several places in Scotland, but I write about the MacLeods of Skye and the Hebrides. And I think in the 9th or 10th century, they believed that a fairy married the laird and that they have fey blood. So that when I heard that story, that just fascinated me, and I took it and kind of ran with it. So I have fey people in my books, in my series too, but they actually believe that at one point in time. I don't know if they do today, but they believe that they tie their history to actually fey, to the fae. So there's a lot of cool MacLeod stories. And the other one is the MacLeods and MacDonalds in the 1500s. The MacLeod daughter, one of the daughters, Margaret, her name was Margaret, married MacDonald Laird they both had, like, one was up here on Skye and the other one was down toward Armadale, toward the mainland. For whatever reason, after a year of marriage, I don't know if it was because she failed to give him a child. I don't know. He beat the crap out of her, stripped her naked, burned her face, and sent her home on a horse. And It started a war. So that fascinated me. So I don't have them very harsh, because my time travels are like light and fluffy and sexy. They're not like, hey, we're saving the world. It's not that serious. Like all the other things that were going on in Scotland at the time, I am aware it wasn't awesome. But I just don't have that in there. I focus on the later stuff. And so I do have the fact that they hated each other and they were at war, but it's about 100 years later. In my first story was 1672. So I have that they don't like each other very much, but then they are drawn together by marriage, because sisters marry the lairds. So, I mean, again, it is, I don't want to use the word diluted, but it's definitely not like serious and we're going to go to war and kill everybody, because that's not what makes me happy. I like the fluffier, sexier stuff. So that I do have the history stuff in there. It's just not a history lesson, because honestly, I'm a romance reader and writer. I don't want to read a history lesson.
Well, and I know you took a trip to Scotland several years ago, and then you really like absorbed like the feeling, what it was like to be there in the culture. So like, did any of it translate in this book? Did you kind of use any of that?
I would say yes and no. I did get to go to Skye, which is where this story takes place in modern times, where Lexi comes forward. The hero's name is Graham, and he's a MacDonald, of course, because I had to. Because I got to see modern day Skye, which honestly probably doesn't look much different than it did 200 years ago, just because, or no, 350 years ago, but just because it's very rural and you do take the ferry to go there and it's beautiful. There's lots of bed and breakfasts, lots of hairy coos. So that was a lot of fun. But seeing it in modern day helped me, because I did pinpoint some things that are real, like where Graham lives in Calgary, and Dunvegan is still there. The MacLeod stronghold is still there. So I did like look on the map and I could picture the roads in my head because I was there. I got to ride on those roads and stuff. So that did help a little, but like we went to Ellendonnan, which is the castle that's on a lot of my covers, but it's McRae. It's not really anything to do with my castle. It's just the most photographed castle in Scotland in the whole world, and people do go there. But actually on this book cover, it actually is Dunvegan. And the reason I did it, it's subtle, and I don't know if people are going to notice, but there are modern day things on top of the castle, and I wanted them to clue people in that it takes place now and not back in time. So that's why we did pick Dunvegan. But it's hard to find a photograph of Dunvegan to use for commercial use because they protect it. People still live in it. It is a thing. You can go see it, you can go tour it and stuff, but the current laird was born in 1946, so he's getting older, but he lives there. Seeing Scotland really helps me with writing modern day Scotland. Now writing 17th century Scotland, that's fine, you can make that stuff up, but it was cool to see it for sure. So I would love to go back, and I do want to go back, and I intend to go back and go to the Isle of Skye for a couple of weeks, have everybody leave me alone, and just so I can write in peace. I really do want to go and spend some time on the Isle of Skye. Very much time. We were only there for like maybe a couple hours. So I actually want to like stay there.
So because we have Scots, obviously in the book, are there any kilts?
in real life, so we're taking liberties again because it's fiction. In real life, they really didn't start wearing kilts until the 1700s. So since I'm so close to the 1700s, because my books are late 16s, I'm cheating. Okay, I cheated in my other books too, but whatever, because people want books and people want pretty boys in kilts. It is what it is. So I do have, like I said, the hero in this one is American, but in the very end of the book, there is a very humorous scene with both. I bring everybody back on stage: Hugh MacDonald, Alex, and Duncan MacLeod. And there's a very touching / humorous scene. And Graham does wear a kilt for his wedding. So, spoiler alert, they get married at the end. So it does come on page. It's just not like when they take place in the 17th century, they wear kilts throughout, or what they call in Scotland, they don't really call it a kilt, they call it a plaid. So whenever you see that in a book, it's a plaid. And traditionally they did lay down to put it on. It's pretty interesting. You can YouTube it on how did you wear a kilt. If you do watch Outlander, there is a scene in, I think, the 4th or 5th season where you do see Jamie get dressed. They actually really did lay down. But go ahead and go YouTube it, and you can actually watch somebody put on a kilt. I'm sure you can find a video. But so I do have kilts on page, just not throughout the whole book, unfortunately.
Hey, we get some kilt action. That's the important thing.
Right. And it's funny. It's funny.
Yeah, so, exactly.
At least I try. It's funny in my head. Don't tell me if it's not funny. Okay.
And you referenced earlier that the whole, at least the legend, right, that the Laird had married a fae. So, and you use that as the basis of, like you said, like kind of carried out throughout your Highland romances. So like how much of a magic element is kind of ingrained into it? Because I know you make reference to the fae realm in the book.
Well, Lexi is half fae and half human. Her mother is a fae princess, and that's the prequel to the series. So she does have magic. She can blink, which means travel basically telekinetically, picture one place and go. But since it does take place in modern days, there's not tons and tons of magic in it. There's some magic references. There is some time travel back and forth. And they use the vehicle to get to different times is called the Fairy Stones. And it's in a cave on the beaches of Skye, not too far from Dunvegan, which is where the MacLeods live. And they keep it protected. But her mother is basically made of magic. So Lexi's is a little muted just because she is half human. But she does know magic. She can do magic tricks. She can do, tricks is spells. I don't want to use the word trick, but yeah, so there is magic like woven throughout the whole series, just because, like I said, several of my characters are with fae characters. Alana is Alexi's mom, and then Alana's cousin Xander was a fae warrior. He's married to Lexi's aunt, blood aunt, her father's sister. So a lot of my characters have magic because of that. Now I do make references throughout the series that it is a little bit harder. They have to work for it in the human realm. It flows much more naturally in the fae realm. And then because we are in the 21st century in this book, not that many people believe in it anymore. So they have to fight for it even harder. So there's definitely that woven belief system that makes magic stronger. It is there, but you have to work for it. So, but yeah, the fae is still definitely there. It's because like I said, Lexi is a half fae.
I love that you took an existing legend too and kind of put your own spin on it to integrate it more into your books, because sometimes and there's nothing wrong with it. Sometimes there is the magic elements kind of left out, or it's kind of questionable what that magic came from to transport, and I'm glad you expanded upon it, because it does make it a little more, gives them more depth in the world, right? Especially since you said a lot of them are interconnected.
And it just fascinates me that someone can feel like their family was part fairy. I don't know. It's just like, it just totally fascinates me. There's also a legend about the fairy flag and how there's wishes in it. And that's a MacLeod thing. They actually still have the fairy flag. You can see it. So that is in one of my books, but, and then there's a magic horn, Rory MacLeod, which the laird in the 1500s, one of the lairds in the 1500s, he had a magic horn. So you just have to, it's really cool that they actually have these heirlooms and you can see see them. I don't want to feel it's true because it's supposed to be a fairy. It's from the Fey realm or whatever. But the fairy flag in real life, they have done some testing on it, and it is silk, and it's probably from Turkey or ancient Turkey. But that just hurts my feelings, and I don't like hearing that. So it's magic, and it has one wish remaining in it. So there was 3 wishes. It's pretty fascinating that they still have it. You can actually see it. It's on display with Rory's horn. It's just really fascinating that people felt like that, like they really thought they were part fairy. So I just took it and ran with it. I'm not the only one. There's probably other books out there that do it too, but
I just love the concept that you kind of took it and ran with it. You mentioned that all of your books, you don't plot, but a lot of your books, if not all of them, are interconnected, right? Interwoven in some regard, especially all the Highland time travels. Mm-hmm. So like, do you go in thinking, okay, I'm going to interconnect this somehow? Or does it, like you said, happen organically? Like how does it
happens organically? So let's leave that up to luck. Yeah, I don't really have like an overall arching thing. Like I know the next book is about Liam, who is Xander's son, if anyone read the series. And he goes to the Fey realm. So that book actually takes place in the Fey realm. And I did start it. I do have it started. So, but I don't have any like massive plans. It just happens. You know, like I take all of the books, they're all family and they all know each other, but they're all standalone within the series. So technically, if you just wanted to read Lexi's book first, you could. I don't recommend that because there's too many spoilers. I say start at the beginning, but I'm also a person who reads books in order in series. So that's just me. But all of the books are within the series, they are standalone. So you could walk in at any time. So I guess maybe that's why I don't consciously think about overarching things that happen. You know, sometimes I have to go back and look up elements, see how I describe things, because you want it to be consistent. But, you know, it's like, they all know each other. So they're all family, they're all blood. So if you walked in the end, you'd have some major spoilers about who's married to who and how many kids they have, et cetera, et cetera. But if that doesn't bother some people, you know, they just read the one that looks the most interesting to them.
Well, and you bring up a really interesting point. Do you ever go revisit, especially if it's been a while since you've written some of these books, do you ever go back and revisit some of your other books, like you were saying? Like, because I know this one in particular took a little bit to write.
Yeah, life happened. I changed jobs. So when you change full-time jobs, that's very demanding. But yes, I do. I have to go back. As a matter of fact, before I really got into the meat of Lexi's book, I think I had maybe 10 or 15,000 words, maybe less than that. I went ahead and reread her brother's book, which is the one right before it, Highland Oath, because I needed to refamiliarize myself with the world, plus see what I had, you know, what was going on there. And again, how you describe things, because I don't want to like come in left field with a description and somebody who reads the whole series will yell at me, because they'll send you emails and they'll be like, you said this. And then, so, I try to avoid that. So, but yeah, no, the whole series, you know, like I'm familiar with who the couples are, what was the main drive in their book and stuff like that. But yeah, I do have to look them over again. I can't store it all up in my brain, especially if it's been a while. But then you have authors who have Bibles or have somebody make them a Bible to read the whole book and then do basically write everything down. So that's an idea. I do have a Bible for my high fantasy series. I don't for this series. Maybe I'll get on that. And that way I won't have to I can go to one document instead of rereading the books. Although I'm a little bit of a narcissist and I like to read my books because I think they're really good. And so I'll go back and like read scenes that I like the best and, you know, go from there. Not semi-recently, I changed the cover on the prequel to the series, which is Lexi's parents' story, Alana and Alex. I actually reread most of the whole book, read most of it, just because it's probably... Don't tell the others. It's probably my favorite in the series. Don't tell the others. But you know, it sets up a lot of things because it is a prequel. Now it wasn't written at the beginning because I never intended to write Alex and Alana's book, because they are already married in the first book of the series, the original trilogy, which is Claire and Duncan's book. Alex and not to digress too much, but Alex and Duncan are twins. And when Alana's father, the king, finds out she married a human in secret, it causes all sorts of drama. So he's looking for her. Duncan is looking for his brother in the first book, and that's how Claire gets sucked back in time. So I never really intended to write their story. They already had a child, which is Angus. It was already, we're done. It's good. You guys are happily ever after. Love you, mean it. Go. And then they were like, no, you're writing our book. Okay. So you might as well face it. So their book is way longer than the rest because it was a very intricate plot. That's another one, another pain for not plotting, because I worked myself into a corner, and the plot takes place over 10 years, a 10-year period. And it was very intricate and I needed lots of help with it. That's probably my favorite book in the series because it's a lot. It goes in and out and up and down, and I must really love Angus because he's their son and he's in lots of my books. In addition to his own, you don't realize that how much you like a character until they keep showing up. So I love Angus. I wouldn't have named him Angus necessarily had I realized that so much. It's not my favorite Scottish name.
Well, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, like you were talking about, like, sometimes you have to cut words and it hurts deeply. Mm-hmm. Have you ever taken, or do you ever repurpose those words, like take those words and put them elsewhere, or say like, I love this scene. I don't think it's going to work for this book, but I'm going to put a bookmark on it and try to save it for another book. Do you ever do that?
Sometimes, like I'll have them, or I'll have a deleted scenes file. Maybe they work with promotion, maybe one day I'll build another story around it, like a short story. One of the books has an after an HEA, like an after their HEA story, because I knew their story wasn't done. Mm-hmm. And I knew stuff that I wanted people to know. It was only supposed to be a 10,000 word short story. It's 25,000 words. I can't write short, but that's neither here nor there. But stuff like that happens where you're like, oh, I have this little kernel. I know this, I know this about them and I want to share this. So yeah. Like an offshoot, an after, I call them HEA stories, like happily ever after, slice of life kind of stories. So yeah, sometimes I end up with those.
And this story in particular is a dual POV, right?
Yes. Yeah. Most of my books are. And then in my romantic suspense, I usually have the bad guy too, because remember, the antagonist thinks that they are the star. So, and I write good bad guys. These don't really have bad guys, but they are more like internal. I would say this series is more internally conflict driven, I would say. But yeah, this book has both POVs. Graham is American, but he is of Scottish descent, and he's a MacDonald, as I mentioned earlier, and he came to Scotland after his parents were killed in a car accident to connect with his grandfather, because his grandfather is the only one that is left on his father's side, basically. So it's too hard. I do write in the brogue. I know that bothers some people, but I do write in the brogue, and it's too hard to have two characters that are in brogue. So I always make one of them American or something else, because it's too hard. So like it's easy peasy with the time travels with the women going back in time because they're all American. Mm-hmm. And then all of my characters are from Texas because I live in Texas. So I had to make a joke about it. Like there must be only Texas because all of them are from the Dallas area. So, but whatever. I made a joke about it in the book, but that's where I live. And so I guess that's what I wanted to highlight. So, but Graham is from the Dallas area. And he's an architect by trade. His father was a very successful, big name construction company in Dallas. And after his father died, he inherited it, and then he sold it, and then he moved to Scotland. He didn't know if he was going to stay there permanently, but he probably is, at this point in time. He just wanted to get closer to his grandpa, who is a big old curmudgeon, but I love his grandfather. He's one of my favorite characters in the book. His name is James, and he's a master restorer. Like, people know him all over the UK and all over Europe for making things look old and restoring them. So that's what he's doing. That's how they are working on the castle that Lexi was born into. Basically, they're working on a project in the castle. So that's how they come. That's why they are where they're at when the story opens up, I should say.
Mm. Well, and you are so good at making like really characters we care about. Right. Because that's the whole point of, like, I think a big part of like selling point of romance, and in particular, something like time travel romance, when you have a lot of like time travel shenanigans going on, and like you have to because isn't there parts where there's a lot of explaining to do, especially for like the heroine?
Fortunately. Yeah, there is a lot of explaining to do. You have to try to keep that exposition to a manageable amount. Because people don't like to read that. Dialogue keeps the scene moving. So yeah, but yeah, there's some stuff you can't get away from. You just can't.
Right, exactly. And like that is such a big part, I think, of the time travel trope is it is a fish out of water story. So you have to do some amount of explaining, and it's learning to integrate that a little more succinct to where it flows with the story, like you said, either through dialogue or through showing. Like I remember you were telling us a lot about these scenes, and I read several of the scenes, and you did a lot of great showing.
Pat myself on the back here. One thing that helps me when I'm trying to describe something is imagine the terror that you would feel if you have never ridden in a vehicle and someone puts you in a vehicle. Because that's how Lexi and Grim meet on the beach, and then he puts her in his grandpa's truck. Just imagine that. You want to curl up in a ball. I remember when I was writing that scene, I was trying to get in with her in her head and what she would think, what she would feel, what she would smell, what it would look like. She's never seen a seatbelt. She's never seen a canvas seat, that kind of thing. So you have to think about that. So that helps when you're trying to show things. Like, imagine stepping into a kitchen for the first time and you've never seen a gas stove, but you've seen an electric stove. You just things like new gadgets. Do you remember, you're young, but do you remember the first time you saw a cell phone? What you knew what that was, things like that. And it's hard to, if you're an adult person, it's hard to imagine, like try to describe some of that stuff. Like there's things I wouldn't know what are if I walked into a machine shop. I'm not familiar with that. There's a point where you can try to keep things vague and keep the story moving, but you do have to, you can't get away from describing everything. You just can't. It's unfortunate, but like I said, it was much more of a challenge than I thought it was going to be, because I know what a car looks like and what a shifter looks like and what a car key looks like and all that. I know what a seatbelt is, and how I remember one scene in particular that I described. Lexi liked the feel of the seatbelt and the noise that it made when she scraped her nail across it. And so that was like it was a fat ribbon is how she described it, because she knows what a ribbon is. A fat, thick ribbon. So, you have to think about what she would know what things are and how you make it real. So it's not that black box, like they say, you want to you don't want to have your characters having dialogue in a white box where there's nothing to describe around them. So I like description. I probably do too much description. So my editor always trims it down, but some of it is necessary to move the story forward, especially when you have a fish out of water story, like you said, where someone's coming forward and doesn't have any idea.
That's what I always do, is use this comparison of like, what context do I have that would relate to what this might be? Like I think that's how a lot of times we kind of gauge things as humans. It's like, okay, well, I know what this thing is. How does that compare to this new thing?
Yeah, for sure. One of my favorite scenes was underwear, having her put on some underwear because she'd never seen underwear before. Now that is kind of like I'm skating the line there and not really breaking my own rules, but my heroines are from the 21st century and go back. And I have one heroine in particular that made underwear with the materials given. But Lexi just didn't know what underwear were. So someone might yell at me for that and say, well, but you said that's okay, because I couldn't pass up the opportunity to have her put on a pair of underwear and describe it and not know what to do with it. So,
well, right. Exactly. If you're not going to have possibly not another book like this, where they jump forward from the past to the future with no idea, right? You got this one chance to write the scene.
Yeah. And bras, of course, she's never seen a bra before because they didn't do them, But yeah, no, it's it was a lot of fun. Like, getting her dressed in modern times. That was one of my favorite scenes. That was a lot of fun.
And I like that you referenced that, because we had talked about breaking your own rules as an author. Like sometimes we set out rules in our own worlds of like, this is the way the magic works, or this is the way the world works, the characters are, things like that. But we can break those as long as we have a reason to, and a good reason to.
Yeah, people still get really mad though. And as a reader, I don't like when authors break their rules that they set up previously. But a lot of it has to do with like, I didn't know that at that point in time. Oh, and true. As you grow, especially if you're writing series, when you sit down to write book 1, there's crap that's going to happen in book 5 that you didn't know. It just is what it is. Even if you plot, So you do have to be careful when you break those rules. And that's a little one. I'm not going to sweat, if someone yells at me or sends me an email about it, that's a little one, especially because it's funny. So that usually will fix it. But, that's one thing that you don't want to do as an author is you don't want to break rules. And I did kind of another one that it's pertinent to this story is her mom can do magic. And I have a scene where she needs to heal. And I had made a reference in the previous book that she wasn't much of a healer. So I am changing that, but I kind of tried to bulk it up by making clues and stuff that over time she's grown in her magic, because I needed it to happen in this book. So, it is what it is. When you, like I said, when you sit down and write stuff, sometimes there are answers you don't know. But I don't like when authors break rules. So I really, really try not to. Like you said, you have to have a good reason for it, a good explanation, and go from there. So that's you can beef it up, but you have to explain it. Don't just break a rule and move about your business without an explanation, because you'll tick people off who read your series. And that's definitely not my aim, to tick people off.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's ever any author's aim to, well, I hope not, at least. It might be. I don't know. I don't live your life, so you do you.
Yeah, right?
But you make a great point, because I've talked to several authors who tell me, I didn't know starting this book, it was going to end up being like a trilogy or a 5-book series or anything like that. And sometimes when we start out on the writing journey and we're writing a book that we have been wanting to write for a very, very long time, sometimes it spirals and just becomes okay, well, there's a novella now. Well, there's a sequel. Well, now there's a third one. And so it just continues to build upon itself. And sometimes those rules do get a bit broken, but it is good to be conscientious of that going into it.
Yeah. And I write series, and I know that I write series. And so even if I don't know that whose book is next, I know there's going to be a next book. And sometimes you just don't know. I have a bad habit of falling in love with my secondary characters. They'll come to the forefront, or somebody that's there for comic relief, or, a best friend, or a sibling. I know they're going to have a book. I just don't know which one's next. It is what it is. Now, the next book in this series, Liam, he and Lexi they're partners in crime. So they always get in trouble together. So he's next. He's definitely next. Like I said, I started it already. So the one after that, I'm not really sure. From the original trilogy, Claire has 3 boys. Claire and Duncan have 3 boys. I don't know that I'm going to write 3 books, but Lachlan, the oldest one, is definitely going to get a book. And then my Hugh, and if anybody who reads my series, Hugh and Jules have 1 daughter, and I like her very much. Her name's Brenna, and I think she'll get a book too. So I don't know how many books I'm going to go. I don't know. I wrote a prequel in a trilogy, and now I'm already on book 2. So I know this one's going to be more than a trilogy. I can't help myself. So it's just when they present themselves, I build the story around them. So we'll see how that goes. It'll be fun. There'll be a lot of comic relief. And then I kind of tend to all bring the family members back together, so they get at least one scene on page, because that's fun. Everybody likes to see everybody else if you read a series.
Well, yeah, as long as the characters keep talking to you, right? You'll keep writing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I love Hugh and Jules. I love them very, very much. So that's why they ended up with a 25,000 word add-on story. They're book 3 of the original trilogy.
Well, and we've talked so much about all these amazing books that you have written. Where can listeners find your books, and how can they connect with you?
Well, of course, I'm wide. I'm what is called wide, which means my books are available at all the retailers. I do have paperbacks. But one thing I would really like to pimp, for lack of a better word, is buying them from my website. So I have an ebook web store. I have an ebook store on my website, and I have a paper book store on my website. Now, if you like paperbacks, the place to buy them is my website, because I don't sell them for retail. I sell them for less than retail, because the reason they are, quote, so expensive on retail is because it's something that the printers just make you do. So I give people a little bit of a break. They're a couple bucks cheaper if you buy it from me, directly from me, instead of Amazon. So, and also ebooks too. I have all my books in ebook format. You download it and put it on your Kindle or whatever reader. It is an EPUB. If you need a Mobi, you can email me and I'll send you one. Because unfortunately, the method I sell it won't let me have more than one digital file. But now even Kindle is EPUB too. So that's where I would prefer people buy them from my website. But I am wide, so you can get them on Amazon, Kobo, Barnes and Noble, Google Play, Apple, Smashwords, and a couple other odd ones in between that we don't necessarily use in the US. And also new for me, I have my books on Radish in serialized form. So I know that mostly Radish is not necessarily an American audience, but just throwing that out there. And I also have 10 audiobooks. Now, unfortunately, the Highlanders are not in audio yet. That's something I'm working toward. But I do have, I have 10 audiobooks if you want to check out. And I have awesome narrators that do a great job. But writing Highlanders is a lot of fun, and I really enjoy this series. So I'm just going to keep going with it until Rice Krispies put me in a different direction.